All right, guys, we are going to start our James Monroe through Andrew Jackson test now. Take a deep breath. You're going to do great. All right, let's look at number 1. Which of these best summarizes the Monroe Doctrine? B. International peace can be maintained without complicated alliances. C. The power to nullify federal laws is necessary to preserve sovereignty. Or D. Further colonization of the Americas by European countries is prohibited. Remember that prohibited means not allowed. Okay, number 2. The title of this cartoon is His Foresight. The cartoon says, Europe, you're not the only rooster in South America. Uncle Sam says, I was aware of that when I cooped you up. The U.S. foreign policy illustrated in this cartoon was intended to A. Prevent further European colonization in the Western Hemisphere. B. Deter Spain from inciting revolution to former U.S. colonies. Or C. Encourage European powers to invest in Latin America. I want you to look at both number 1 and number 2. They have something in common in the answer choices that should be helpful to you. Number 3. President Andrew Jackson supported the use of the spoils system during his administration as a way to A. Eliminate the common requirement that voters own property to vote. B. Give more citizens a chance to experience serving in the government. Or D. Limit the involvement of common citizens in his administration. Number 4. A citizen supporting the ideals of Jacksonian democracy would most likely have favored. Okay, let's remember, Andrew Jackson, he started the Democratic Party. That's all it's saying is who would have liked this. A government by a popularly elected monarch. C, a government in which service is open to all citizens. Or D, a government by a military elite of army officers. So Andrew Jackson, which type of government would he have liked the best? Okay, number 5. I know there's a lot of words on here, but don't panic. This one's actually really easy. So this is a flow chart, and I'm going to start with the chart. So go over to the right-hand side with me, and let's just read through it. So in 1824, there was an election. Remember that Andrew Jackson had won most of the votes, but since he didn't have 50%, the House of Representatives got to decide, and John Quincy Adams ended up being the winner. Later on, when Andrew Jackson changed the way the voting happened and allowed more people to vote, it says property qualifications for voting eliminated, allowing more men to vote for president. So that means you don't have to own property anymore to be able to vote for the president. So then in 1828, when we had another presidential election, 4 times as many people got to vote in that election, and Andrew Jackson ends up winning. So what we're saying here is, what does this illustrate? So let's look at our answer choices. A decrease of voter turnout, so that means there's less people voting. B, the rise of the common man in the American politics. Or C, the decline of American political parties. Number 6, which Supreme Court decision established the principle that the federal government, rather than the individual state governments, has the authority to deal with American Indian affairs? Is it B, Worcester versus Georgia, C, McCulloch versus Maryland, or D, Gibbons versus Ogden? So that one's dealing with Native Americans. Remember, we just talked about it this week. Okay, we have another Native American question, number 7. And this map is showing the relocation of the Indians, which basically means where they moved. So you can see they moved them from the southeast, like Florida, Georgia, Alabama, all the way to the west where the Indian Territory is. So what was a major reason for the federal government's involvement in the relocations depicted in this map? Okay, all that says is, why did Andrew Jackson want to move the Indians? Okay, so let's listen. A, did Jackson want to persuade the Indians to become farmers? B, did Jackson want to gain access to important rivers? Or D, did Jackson want to acquire valuable agricultural land and natural resources? So all D is saying is, did Andrew Jackson want to get farmland and natural resources? All right, let's look at number 8. It says, in the first half of the 19th century, Cherokee efforts to retain their tribal lands in Georgia received direct support from. Okay, so all that means is, who did the Native Americans have on their side? Who was trying to help the Cherokees? Okay, now this one has 5 answer choices, so I crossed out 2. So let's look for who had the best shot at helping the Native Americans. Was it A, the white residents in Oklahoma, C, the United States Supreme Court, or E, the United States Congress? Number 9, how did the War of 1812 most affect the U.S. economy? A, disruption in trade continued to domestic. Let me start that over. That was all wrong. A, disruption in trade contributed to domestic industrial growth. So all that means is because we weren't trading with England, the industry and the economy in America grew. B, small farmers benefited from higher export prices for grain crops. Or D, new trade alliances resulted in increased foreign investment. So what happened after the War of 1812? What are we doing more of? Number 10. What was the primary question surrounding the 1832 nullification crisis? So let's review in our brain. Okay, nullification crisis, that's the one where South Carolina wanted to nullify the tariff. Okay, so let's figure out which question they're really considering. Was it B, can a state regulate a federal agency? C, can a state overturn a federal law? That just means, overturn means like to get rid of. Or D, can the federal government levy taxes on states? Number 11, here we have a quote, and this quote happens to be the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. And it says, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. So remember, that basically means that the state gets some powers. It's not just the federal government that has all the power. Okay, so conflicting interpretations of this amendment played a major role in what that question is saying is, because people are arguing about this amendment, which event was impacted? A, the bank war, B, the nullification crisis, or D, the XYZ affair? Guys, that one should be easy because I've only talked about one of those. Okay, number 12. So check it out. We got a long quote. Don't look at anything except for who wrote it. I'm going to circle it. Okay, you see it? You see John C. Calhoun wrote it. Okay, I don't want you to worry so much. I'm going to read the quote, but don't panic if you don't understand it. We're going to work through it, I promise. Okay, so sovereign powers are divided between the general and state governments. The latter hold their portion by the same tenure as the former. It would seem impossible to deny the states the right of deciding the infraction of their powers and the proper remedy to be applied for their correction. Okay, so John C. Calhoun, remember, who's he? He's the vice president underneath Andrew Jackson. And remember, he was a little bit of a troublemaker. So let's read the question and not worry so much about the quote. Based on this excerpt, which best summarize Calhoun's view on the issue of states' rights? Okay, so stop and think. When South Carolina's dealing with all their stuff, does South Carolina get support from John Calhoun, or is he on Andrew Jackson's side? Okay, so let's read. Does Calhoun think A, a state can nullify any federal law that it does not agree with? B, a state can nullify a federal law if it believes that the law wrongfully challenges its sovereign rights? Or D, a state can nullify any federal law, but not a constitutional amendment? Remember that nullify means to cancel out. All right, guys, we made it to the last page. Here we go. You ready? We got this. Okay. Number 13. Which of the following is the best title for this diagram? Okay, remember everything I've been talking about all throughout this test, even if you have to rewind and listen. Let's check out this diagram. It says Congress enacts the protective tariffs, but South Carolina adopts an ordinance declaring that the tariffs are void within the state borders. So basically what that means is South Carolina says, forget you tariffs, I'm not paying you, I don't like you, I'm going to ignore you, even though Congress said I had to. So then President Andrew Jackson sends the Navy forces to Charleston and warns South Carolina, you better not commit treason. So he's like shaking his finger at him. Congress passes a bill giving the president the power to enforce the tariffs, and South Carolina finally says, okay, fine, we'll repeal it, we'll pay your tariffs. So what event is this talking about? A, events leading to the Mexican War. B, the causes of the Whiskey Rebellion. Or D, the chronology of the nullification crisis. Chronology just means timeline, guys. So all that's saying is this a timeline of the nullification crisis? All right. Number 14. What was President Jackson's response to the nullification crisis? So what did he do when South Carolina said, I don't want to pay your tariff? A, he admitted that the Union, or the United States, is just a compact of states. B, he agreed with South Carolina's right to secede. Or D, he threatened to use force against South Carolina if it did not repeal its nullification. If you're having trouble answering question 14, look at question 13's timeline diagram. Last question, number 15. In Worcester versus Georgia, the Supreme Court held that Georgia's state laws did not apply to Indian territories. How did President Andrew Jackson respond to the Supreme Court's decision? So, in other words, when the Supreme Court was on Worcester versus Georgia's, let me rephrase that. When the Supreme Court said that Georgia was wrong and that the Native Americans win, what did Andrew Jackson do? A, he urged Georgia to change its laws. B, he ignored the court's ruling. Or C, he proposed an amendment to the Constitution to overrule the court. Okay, now that you're done, I want you also to check out, look at number 15, and then also go back and check to see if you answered number 6 correctly, because I bet number 15 will help you. All right, guys, you did awesome.